Okay, I guess we're live. So I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Board of Selectmen, September 9th, 2015. And this is a kind of a special meeting, just one item on the agenda, and that's to just continue discussing the liquor license for 556 Adams Street, with hopefully the intention of voting one way or the other on that license tonight, as it does have to. We have a 30-day, what is it, 30 days from the time
the application's filed.
Application was filed to issue, which would expire before our next meeting. So, that being said, I think the first order of business would be just to discuss conditions.
What about citizen speak? Do you want to start with that?
We don't have an agenda, but yeah, sure, if there is any citizen speak, they're certainly welcome to come up and...
There was one online that said citizen speak. That's the only reason I'm bringing it up, in case any of these people were
Okay.
there for that.
All right, I didn't see the online, but... So if anybody would like to address the board, they're more than welcome to. Okay? No? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on. So how do we want to handle it? Do we want to vote first, then discuss conditions, or do we want to discuss conditions and vote?
I'd say conditions first. We'll just talk a little bit about it and then get into a vote. My opinion.
Okay. When you say vote, did you mean on whether to grant the license subject to the conditions?
Yes.
I see.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to have Marion and Vance come up to, if you have questions, or if you'd like to? Sure, come on up. Okay, the last time we met on this, there were a number of conditions already proposed by the licensee. I think they were to the liquor license, specific to the liquor license. There were, 11 conditions, I guess. There were two of them that I had an issue with, and I think I suggested the change. One was on the condition restaurant, not a bar, and it was not a problem with which stated that alcohol revenue from sale of liquor would not be more than 25% of total revenue, and that the proof of that would be a reviewed financial statement, which I would prefer to see what's called an attestation engagement. So the wording would say, restaurant revenue shall not, from sale of alcohol, shall not exceed 25% of total revenue. At the time of annual renewal of the license, the owner must provide a report from a duly licensed certified public accountant, provided at a minimum limited assurance as defined in section AT 101 of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants attestation standards of the owner's assertion that liquor sales of the previous year did not exceed 25% of total revenue. So that was my first one.
Seems okay to me if it's feasible for the applicant to do.
Yeah, basically all it really is the owner asserts to the CPA that my revenue from liquor was less than 25% or less, and the CPA does some testing. And this does not raise to the level of an audit, because limited assurance means something less than an audit. So it will be a review, so a little less costly, that he would provide some procedures to give the selectmen at least limited assurance that liquor sales were not more than 25%. So I think it's a little bit better service than just a plain review.
Can I ask a rather dumb question?
Sure.
If it's supposed to do prior year's sales, but I don't know what kind of accounting restaurants do. I don't know what fiscal year they use. So, the liquor license comes up at the end of November. That's not any fiscal year that I know of. So,
Right.
do you want to say
I
what
would say the
fiscal
previous
year?
fiscal, yeah, the
Previous fiscal year
year.
for the restaurant.
That would be the
Whatever.
easiest thing, yeah, because then you
Okay.
can dovetail with whatever.
Thank you.
Everybody agree with that?
I agree.
That's fine.
Okay. Okay, and then the only other change that I had was the seating at the bar and it requiring no more than 2 drinks without service of food, and we've changed the word food to meal. and meal to be defined, you know, a meal certainly can be an appetizer or something like that, but something more than a bag of nuts. So that's why we changed to meal. And I would also like to see that provision also go to the, any service at restaurant table as well, that, you know, they wouldn't have more than 2 drinks. If somebody wanted to sit at the table and kind of prolong the visit there and not order food for a while, could potentially, unlikely to happen, but could potentially have more than 2 drinks.
Any issue with
That's what we do now.
Okay, great.
Okay. I just had a question, and you know, probably answer very quickly, but related to parking and also deliveries. Just, I want assurance that we won't have large trucks such as 18-wheelers going through the neighborhood, that we monitor that. I know it does happen on occasion. We do receive phone calls when that does occur, and I know that you do your best to do that, but just to look out for the neighbors, and you know, maybe, you know, having a conversation with the food delivery trucks that you deal business with regularly, that they know that Adams Street, you know, as it does say in the language, that is going to be where the deliveries are going to occur. And then on parking, that the 21 space lot, is there an opportunity to, at the end of the night, close that parking lot and then reopen it just before the restaurant opens during lunch?
Yeah, we could probably chain it.
Is it a possibility? Because
I'd
I think
have
that,
to- yeah, I
I
haven't
think
seen
that would
it.
be something beneficial to the neighborhood, something that we've heard, that might be a good start.
Yeah,
I suppose that
sure.
way you wouldn't get people parking at least before and after hours.
Right.
We could make that commitment. I'm not sure exactly how it would work out.
Yeah, and I know Billy does a great job for Bob Falcone in his lot, so I'm pretty sure that you'll be right on top of it anyhow.
Yeah, he's pretty good at policing the law.
He's really good.
Okay, and as far as the delivery, we are in fact getting a delivery space, a marked delivery space on Adams Street. That is to come.
Well, there is a meeting of the Traffic
Traffic
Commission,
Commission.
because the Traffic Commission has to decide whether to recommend to the selectmen. So
Okay.
it will be up to you, actually.
Yeah.
But I'm told by Chief Wells that that's on their next agenda, both the delivery space on Adams Street for large trucks.
Yes,
And the point of that is that that's where large trucks are supposed to park. They're not supposed to go onto the short side streets.
not just for this restaurant, but for
For
the square.
everybody.
Right.
And then
I think that's
for
long overdue.
valet parking as well, which would require valet parking space to be designated, probably, perhaps a double space. And the 2 restaurants are going to coordinate the valet parking, but they're also going to be considering that. So you will see, if they recommend both of those spaces, you will see it coming back to your meeting, and then it will be your decision whether or not to approve it. So it helps to know that you're in favor of it. And that was what the planning board came up with, really, after a lot of discussion at the hearings last winter about what could be done to try to direct truck traffic. Small trucks can go into the small lot on the side, little, you know, local produce trucks. But these big, whatever they are, 12-wheel, I don't know what how you describe them, 18-wheelers, they're very, they block the street, and nobody wants to see them on the side street. So that was the solution. That permit as well, of course, can be revisited if there's still a problem, but it says in the permit that that the restaurant is going to regulate its deliveries to reasonable hours that won't be obtrusive to neighbors, and that large trucks will deliver on Adams Street, and that small trucks will go into the Park Street lot, Church Street lot. So there won't be parking on the street. That was a concern that was expressed at the hearings.
Did you have anything else, David?
No, not this time.
So I sent around some comments, they were mostly minor comments to Marion earlier today, but the main one that I wanted to just bring up was just about the hours and the closing times. And Vance, the idea was just that the draft currently says 11 a.m. to midnight, Sunday through Saturday. And we just want to be sure that I wanted to raise the point about whether we're treating it the same way as Abbey Park, which now you've said that sometimes you even close earlier than what you're permitted to, but that the license itself for Abbey Park has different hours, only by an hour, so we're not talking a big difference, but weekdays versus weekends have a different closing time. Then again, Steel and Rye, and I don't know about 88 Wharf because I don't have a copy of that one, but the Steel and Rye one permits the hours to end at midnight. So, so this one is based on midnight. Marion and I talked this afternoon, and one of the factors is that there is going to be valet parking. So one of the concerns with closing at midnight on a weeknight would just be that you could potentially have people congregate in the parking lot, which could be disruptive to some of the neighbors who are trying to sleep. But because we're going to have valet parking, the likelihood of that seems to be pretty minimal. And if it does become a problem, it's something that we could revisit at a later date, whether it's at the renewal time or if there's a significant problem that we're hearing about, we could revisit that. So the question is, do we want to go with the proposed hours as a board, or do we want to make a change? And I don't really feel strongly either way. We are only talking about a small amount of time, but.
Judging from what I've seen of, both the operation of Steel and Rye, certainly, Monday through Thursday, weekends might be a little bit different. Abbey Park, I know, is the same, that pretty much by 10 o'clock, there is nobody left in the restaurant. It's pretty quiet. I mean, there's a half dozen people in there at most. So I wouldn't be totally uncomfortable with that. Again, we always have, if a problem does arise, we can always
revisit it. Vance, could you just speak to what's the practice at Abbey Park, weekends and weeknights, in terms of the closing time?
Well, Sunday nights, we actually close the kitchen earlier, which causes the restaurant to close earlier. So we do close earlier. And we probably would, it just makes better business sense on nights like that to close earlier. So I think it's kind of a natural thing. I think it varies a little bit according to times of year. Maybe around the holidays, or certainly not in the summer, where it's around here anyway. Is it a big deal? There's just maybe some small pockets of time where we would have to disrupt the party if we were restricted there. It's just occasionally.
And I guess the other mitigating fact here is that in the proposed permit, we have a sentence that says the last dinner orders will be taken by 10 p.m., which is not in the Abbey Park license. I don't think it's in the Steel and Rye license either. So that at least is another protection for the neighborhood.
Does Steel and Rye have any stipulations with respect to it? And I know they do have some, I just don't know what they are with respect to its patio dining.
Steel and Rye does have hour restrictions, and so does Wharf Street.
Patio.
But both Steel and Rye and Wharf Street are different because Wharf Street has a condominium complex above it, and I was on the Board of Selectmen when we did that license, and we were concerned, and we agreed with the residents that there would be restrictions on patio hours, which is a great part of that restaurant, because people live above it. Steel and Rye faces neighbors and is on a main street, so the patio is totally visible. So it's not that big, but the restriction exists. It's 10 o'clock.
Yes, so
this patio,
their last seating is 10 p.m.
This patio it was devised really because of the nature of the real estate. There's a sliver of land that goes between two commercial buildings. Both of them are two-story buildings. And, the restaurant's 2 stories on one side. The other one is where the, coffee shop and everything is. That's 2 stories. And it's this narrow strip, and in the back, the little narrow end is the back end of the parking lot for the commercial building on the left. Mm-hmm. In the front is it's less than 6 feet wide. You can see the street.
It's just
there will be no access because it's not permitted by this license, and ABCC prohibits public access to a patio except through the restaurant. But the point is that this is really different, and what the designer told us when he was working on the design was that sound, if there were any, would bounce off these walls back into the restaurant, because those are the 2 high walls on the sides. And that's what we expect to happen. If there were a problem with noise, again, this is an issue that the selectmen could come back to, and they could restrict the hours more. This restaurant patio is different from the other 2 restaurants, and that's why we didn't propose a restriction.
And I think in number 5, it's also reasonable, because we have in number 5, no music or excessive noise is permitted on the patio. So we're already having a prohibition, there's no live entertainment permitted in the restaurant at all under this draft of the permit conditions, and there'd be no music permitted on the patio. So I think that does give a little bit of extra protection here. I had that same question, Tom, about the patio.
And lighting will be low level? And
I
not
don't know
spill?
what kind of lighting would it be.
It's ambient lighting anyway, so
Yeah.
it would be low level.
Okay, so there'd be no possibility of it spilling out into the,
It's very secluded, there's also a pretty high fence surrounding it.
okay,
So it's a courtyard more than a patio.
yeah, okay. Okay.
So for the board, the question of the hours, do we want to stick with 11 to 12, which was proposed and is consistent with Steel and Rye? I'd be willing to do that, subject to revisiting this if it does become a problem.
I would tend to agree. Dave?
Yeah, I agree. You know, I think you've done a good job at Abbey Park. You know, basically you're closing when you're not busy, you know, and obviously we want to support business, but at the same time, we want to be respectful to our neighbors. So, you know, I would go along with that as well, subject to revision, should it be an issue, which I don't foresee.
Yeah, I agree. I don't foresee it either.
The only other thing I want to bring up too is the valet parking, and I know it hasn't been ironed out yet, but just to make sure that, and at Steel and Rye, I don't know whether it actually occurs, but neighbors complain about it, and that's valet parking on residential streets. So to make sure that if we do grant the license, that we figure out some way that the valets are going to park either in the commercial district or on some private properties that they've already, or I even thought, you know, one possibility, we've got a number of service zone spaces that really aren't used at night, that maybe you could make them service zone / valet spaces or something, at least to keep the cars out of the.
Well, that's an interesting idea. No one talked about that last
Right,
year.
It's a possibility.
But what did happen last year was, we didn't know yet whether Abbey Park and this restaurant would have any connection, although it was being discussed. So we couldn't promise that, but we could say that if that happened, then they can coordinate all of the parking that's available to the two restaurants.
Yes.
And select for valet parking use, particularly those parking lots that are less likely to be a problem for neighbors. There's a Citizens parking lot, Citizens Bank parking lot. There's the existing Falcone parking lot. And there's even an additional lot that might be used for overflow, more likely for employees, that's owned by Falcone's. That's further up Granite Ave, that was discussed at the hearing. There's no formal agreement as to that, but it would be a possibility at night because the businesses there may not use it. But that is an interesting idea. We could talk to the Traffic Commission about it to see whether they might consider nighttime flexibility on those service zone spaces, because there's no reason why valet parking couldn't be over there, and that's at a distance, for most of the residences. So it's a good idea. But the other point I wanted to make was, in the permit from the planning board, it says that valet parking, and also from the Board of Appeals, they both use this language, valet parking is to be used, providing it improves the traffic and parking situation.
Right.
So if it doesn't, and it creates a problem, there's a way to withdraw from that option if there's a better way to do it. What I suspect is that it will be very helpful when the restaurant is busy, if it's well managed. And Vance had a company come in with a plan that we showed that involved both restaurants and involved all the parking lots, and showed them how it could work if that became a possibility. So hopefully that's what you'll be starting with and trying to decide how to organize it.
Okay, great.
There were a couple of others. So just on the number 4 in the hours, did we fix the typo at 10 a.m. to 10 p.m.? Did that get fixed? It wasn't in the last version of it that I saw.
I have a final copy. I did, but I didn't know whether it was accurate because we
Mine
had
says
discussion.
11 to 12.
Yeah.
I think
There
it's
was
the-
one place
the
where it
chance
said
that's how
AM and
it's
it should
the
have been
patio.
PM.
Yeah, it said last call for liquor service in the patio will be 10 a.m., should be p.m. We just want to get that right.
Okay, that's not right.
I don't usually crack my first beer that early.
Okay, and then, the others are pretty, I think the only other ones were the smoking section. So the revision currently says, Marion, you correct me if this is not the final one, but it says, no smoking is permitted in the restaurant or on Adams Street in front of the restaurant. There is a designated smoking area available in front of 550 Adams Street, which is Abbey Park. So, is that, Tom, you were the one who raised this point.
Yeah, I would have concern if we have, if there's no smoking at all, that people are just gonna spill out into the square someplace, and you know, if there's a business open, they're gonna wind up in front of theater, so. I
There's a
would
real
prefer that
dilemma.
being-
There's a real dilemma with this, because I talked to the Board of Health about it. And you are not allowed to have a designated smoking area at your entrance, because you're not allowed to let smoke enter the restaurant.
Right.
And this restaurant has a front entrance that's one storefront wide, so you can't have it right there. We don't want to have it in Church Street because of the problem we've already talked about. And I think everybody agrees, we do not want to encourage people to congregate. It's not so much for the smoke, but for the congregation. People might gather out there and talk. So the options are a designated smoking area that isn't right in front of the doorway, and this restaurant is just renting the doorway and the space in back of it. It's possible that we could ask for permission from Falcone Properties to see if we could put a designated smoking area for the restaurant in front of their other storefronts. My suggestion was to have a designated smoking area, but have it be, well, one possibility is have it be the one in front of Abbey Park.
I was thinking that, yeah.
And
Is that
you
too
know,
far along a walk
Well,
for
it's
people to do?
one block. It's somewhat unusual, but the restaurant really didn't want to have any smoking area because they don't really want smoking. I don't think that they're worried about discouraging people who smoke, although I may rue those words. I don't know how you feel, Vance, but the idea was that they didn't want the smoke in the restaurant and they didn't want people congregating in the back. So that was the only other option. So if that's an acceptable compromise for the Board of Selectmen, we could try it.
I think we should make it as difficult as possible to smoke.
Okay, so if we had it combined, one designated smoking area for the two restaurants?
Can I ask a question of Vance? What is the experience at Abbey Park? Are there many smokers who really do stand outside and smoke at the restaurant?
I wouldn't say
Smoking is
many.
decreasing so much
I wouldn't say many.
today.
I mean,
Has it been a problem?
no.
You haven't had complaints
No.
from anyone? Okay. And then the other thing was the sign bylaw. I had suggested we put including but not limited to the sign bylaw, which we'd cite as amended, but I think Marion is probably right that we're looking at revising that anyway, and probably the broad reference to the town of Milton bylaws covers that, so.
So
we
just
can
back again,
withdraw
related to
that
smoke, we had a
comment.
comment from the crowd that the smoking has been on Franklin, not on Adams.
Yes, isn't it the corner of Franklin and Adams?
Franklin and Adams.
Yeah, but that's still a commercial district, right there.
Is that the side of the building?
Yeah, it can't be at the door.
No,
'cause you're
it's
not
gotta be
allowed to
along
put
the
it at
side.
door.
Okay. Just for clarification.
I would say on the smoking, I sort of started a dialogue with the Board of Health, but didn't finish it, and I wanted to know what they thought. And I know they have at times considered even the idea of no smoking in public areas, but they certainly haven't done it. So they could have more feedback, and if they have a better suggestion, this is a minor but perhaps important part of the permit. But again, you could come back and amend the town's liquor license permit to change those provisions. So that's the only suggestion I can make, because at this point, I didn't get enough feedback to really have anything concrete from them.
Everybody comfortable with having a combined smoking area for now?
Yes,
Yeah, hopefully it discourages it.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
No, the others, I think Marion incorporated the others that I sent her, so you would have received, this went out to everyone, Marion, the latest draft. The draft from earlier today, I know you have an updated one.
It's so confusing, but, well, I did one myself, but not, only because I wanted to have notes for this meeting. But I think what went out earlier, Katie's comments were marked on a draft that I had sent out, and that was,
Yeah, one is just to add after the word, in management supervision, corporation or limited liability company,
Right.
which this is. And
Yeah.
the other one is just, initially the draft said, the sale or service of alcoholic beverages is prohibited in any area not licensed by the Board of Selectmen, and no change in such area shall be made without the approval of the board and the chief of police, which was not, it was only the board in the other licenses, so I thought we should keep that consistent.
Sure.
And add, unless shown on an amended plan. So it's without written approval, or without approval by the Board of Selectmen and unless shown on an amended plan. So they would have to file the amended plan
Sure.
that would be presented.
That makes sense.
there is a new provision. You will all notice that I added in my draft this number 4 under the liquor license for the secured and visible patio area. That responds to the new guidelines published at the end of July by ABCC. So I would suggest that that's something that ought to be in future liquor licenses if there's a patio. And I hope you should look at that language because that's new from what you got last week.
That is what we
Yes.
are now.
Page 3,
Okay.
number 4.
Is that this one? Okay. Oh, okay, yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, okay. I think I'm fine with the conditions as we've discussed.
Yes.
Um,
A lot of the others are very similar to what's in the other licenses.
Right. So I'll entertain a motion if somebody wants to make it.
I'll move that we approve the issuance of a common vittler's license and a liquor license for 556 Adams Street LLC, doing business as Novara, subject to the conditions discussed at this meeting.
And I'll second that.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Congratulations.
And good luck.
Just procedurally, Marion, you have the latest draft. Will you send that to Emily? Because we have 3 days now to get this into the ABCC. So we need the final version of all these conditions that we've just talked about. Maybe we should
I'll review
circulate that tomorrow.
Yes, I will review what I drafted for the meeting to make sure that it's exactly what you just voted. And I will send that for you to review and see whether it's accurate. You have 3 days to sort it out and figure out that you've got the right conditions.
Those are business days?
3 business days.
So Monday of
The
next week.
completed application has to go into ABCC within 3 business days. The rest of the application's ready. I've reviewed it really carefully with Barbara. But these conditions and your own decision, you want that to go with it, so. And you have to have a record of the vote, which is one of the documents.
Okay.
I'll do that tomorrow morning.
And speaking of Barbara, this was her first time through one of these liquor license applications, my first time through one of them, and David, I'm sure yours probably too.
Yeah, too.
So, this was a learning experience, but Barbara did a lot of hard work on this, and I want to thank her for all her efforts,
Yeah,
and
that's
and
great.
Marion for all of her
Excellent job.
assistance and help.
Thank
The
you,
board
and I
with
want to
us.
thank Barbara as well, because she was really helpful to me, because it's my first time going through this on this end.
On the other side of
On
the
this
table.
end, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. And a motion to
Recess?
recess to attend the 25%.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all is in favor?
Aye.
We're recessed.